Hi guys, welcome to the Weekly Rushes, a rushed rush through the Weekly Rushes. Your film and streaming news. There's quite a bit of weird news this week, and the first story that I'm going to lead with is a really tragic story that's only just broken today, Friday, that this goes up. Alec Baldwin, the actor, has been involved in what can only be described as the most unfortunate of tragedies on the location of his new film Rust. It's shooting in New Mexico. It's produced by him, it stars him, and I don't know how to put this really, and it's being investigated, but he's tragically, accidentally shot both his director of photography and his director. The director is Joe Souza, who's been shot in the head, and tragically Helena Hutchins, the director of photography, who's just a 42-year-old sort of wonder kid coming through the ranks with a potentially huge career ahead of her, died when she got to hospital from a stomach wound. Now, photographs have been circulating on social media and online of Alec Baldwin looking absolutely, as you would expect, crestfallen and destroyed. So before anyone rushes to judge, the investigation has interviewed him. He has been released. The film set is on lockdown. And obviously attention will be shifting to the props department and the guy or woman who's called the props master. It's not unusual to have guns on set that are actual real guns. In those instances, you usually have a member of the crew called the armourer. So there's going to be a lot of interrogation and investigation there, but it's a tragic event. And obviously, whatever happens, Alec Baldwin will be carrying this for the rest of his life. I mean, it's a total tragedy. Next up is former Batwoman actress Ruby Rose has taken a swipe at Warner Brothers, or the televisual end of Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is under a bit of an assault, you could argue, from a number of fronts. There's obviously been the big story around Joss Whedon, who was the director of Justice League. He's been accused of bullying by various members of the cast of Justice League. Warner Brothers haven't particularly stepped in to defend him because it's very hard to, because there's so many people who are corroborating each other's experience of him. But Gal Gadot, the woman who plays Wonder Woman, she came out this week and she said that she was left in an interview with Elle magazine. She was left dizzy by the way that he spoke to her, but she does say that when she flagged it up with Warner Brothers, they dealt with it. Not the case with Batwoman actor Ruby Rose. Ruby Rose, who suddenly left the show back in, I think, March or May 2020. They left the show, and at the time, they said, "This was not a decision I made lightly, as I have the utmost respect for the cast, crew and everyone involved with the show in both Vancouver and in Los Angeles." Now, on Instagram, on their Instagram stories this week, they said, "Enough is enough. I'm going to tell the whole world what really happened on that set. I will come for you, so what happened to me never happens to another person again. And so I can finally take back my life and the truth. Shame on you." Very strong words, very strong words. Warner Brothers and Co. have issued a strong response alleging it was Ruby Rose at fault. And this is Warner Brothers' response. "Despite the revisionist history, i.e. she's changed the facts, that Ruby Rose is now sharing online aimed at the producers, cast and crew, network and studio, the truth is that Warner Brothers Television had decided not to exercise its option to engage Ruby for season 2 of Batwoman, based on, listen, multiple complaints about work behaviour that were extensively reviewed and handled privately." Ruby Rose's co-star Dougray Scott also said that there were multiple complaints against Ruby. Now, in a sense, I think that perhaps Ruby Rose has been this fearsome and this fiery and this harsh in order to make whatever response Warner Brothers gives seem like a corporation sort of paddling in a sort of desperate measure to kind of just fan it away. What do you think? It's a war of words between Warner Brothers and Batwoman. Some casting news this week. Kate Winslet is clearly on her uppers after winning an Emmy for Mayor of Easttown. If you haven't seen that series, please check it out. Really good. Quite slow, but it's a builder. She's going to star in a new movie, you might have seen it on the Instagram account, called Lee, which is based on the American photographer Lee Miller, who used to be a Vogue model, and bizarrely, she was also the sort of muse and inspiration for the abstract artist photographer Man Ray. did all those beautiful shadows and kind of, moody sort of photos. She's playing Lee Miller, and Lee Miller went from being a model to becoming a World War II photographer. She was even instrumental in kind of exposing the awful atrocities of the Holocaust. Winslet has been cast as the eponymous hero, but it's not a biopic. She stresses, Winslet, it's not a biopic. It's looking at a chunk of Lee Miller's life, 1938 to 48, which is perhaps arguably the most interesting part of her career and life. This is an interesting connection. It's directed by Ellen Duras, who was the director of photography on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which of course Kate Winslet and Jim Carrey starred in together. Other actors in the film, there's a great cast: Jude Law, Marion Cotillard, Josh O'Connor, hot from him winning an Emmy for The Crown, and Andrea Riseborough, who is a wondrously odd, strange and curious actress. A little bit of silly trivia: the Nightmare on Elm Street house has gone up for sale. Nightmare on Elm Street, what a cracking horror film. Does anyone else like that? 1984, I think it was released. Johnny Depp, brilliant horror film. Freddy Krueger, obviously. I've got my Freddy Krueger jumper somewhere. In fact, I've got a bald, without his hat that is, Freddy Krueger here. What's intriguing and interesting about this is it's owned by Lauren Scafaria, the director of Hustlers, the J-Lo film. And she's the wife of Bo Burnham. And if you've seen Inside by Bo Burnham, he shot in the guest house of this property his film Inside. What a strange connection that Freddy Krueger was perhaps at the back of Bo Burnham inspiring that strange, wonderful, weird Inside. Please check out Inside. It's a brilliant commentary on where we're at now, not just lockdown and the pandemic, but what kind of a society we've become. The neat detail is it's being sold, obviously, by Bo Burnham's wife, but the deal is you have to get your offers to buy it in by midnight on Halloween. The Sopranos. Who's a Sopranos fan? Who's a Sopranos fan? Tony Soprano, played by James Gandolfini. Now, you may have noticed that there's a movie, which is a prequel, out at the moment, called The Many Saints of Newark. Interestingly, Tony Soprano, the young Tony Soprano, is obviously played by James Gandolfini's real-life son, Michael Gandolfini. Now, the creator of the hit series, The Sopranos, made for HBO, obviously, David Chase, has teased the idea that there could be a sequel to The Many Saints of Newark. Also stars Ray Liotta, who's one of my favourite, odd, sinister, strange actors. So yeah, David Chase, the creator of The Sopranos, has hinted that there could be a sequel to Many Saints of Newark, but Many Saints of Newark didn't do great box office. So he's also teased up the idea that there might be a prequel series. And I think a prequel series is a better idea than a follow-up to the movie. On our Instagram account, you will have seen Christopher Nolan's film all about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the man who ran the Manhattan Project, the man who was instrumental in creating the atomic bomb and then lived the rest of his life sort of troubled and plagued by the fact that essentially he'd created something that could destroy the entire planet. I think that would weigh heavily on my shoulders. Heavy weighs the crown of an atomic bomb. We also talked last week that Cillian Murphy has been cast to play J. Robert Oppenheimer, and in talks, I stress she's in talks, is Emily Blunt to play his wife. I think that would be a great pairing. And of course, the two of them were acting together in A Quiet Place too, weren't they? So they have some history. Big news, obviously, it's a Christopher Nolan film. Everyone's very excited about it. It's first film away from Warner Brothers, said that last week, and the release date is currently scheduled for July 21st, 2023. Can you believe we're talking about 2023? I mean, in movie studio terms, they're looking at like 2030. They're looking further ahead than even climate change activists are. You can't have missed it. Was DC Fandom last weekend. We went into a sort of tailspin of frenzy, reacting to the Batman trailer, reacting to Black Adam, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and reacting to Peacemaker, starring John Cena, a series on HBO. Just to say, the Batman trailer that we reacted to, there it is up there somewhere, has now clocked 27 million views. A lot of excitement for that. Black Adam, a sort of arch villain of Shazam, played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he was kind of revealed in a first look trailer, and they're not really revealed because he had a sort of giant Jawa hood on. But that kind of looked exciting. And Peacemaker, of the three that we looked at, was perhaps the most sort of disappointing, though I'm most excited about the eagle that plays, I think it's a pet eagle, isn't it? Because the director, James Gunn, is very good at making essentially CGI animals incredibly meaningful actors and performers. We missed the Flash trailer. We'll be reacting to that later, but apparently Michael Keaton reprises his role as Batman. It's very odd, isn't it, in the DC world? You've got many different Batmans rolling around. You've got potentially many different Jokers rolling around. But here's the oddest thing of all. A campaign has been started online suggesting that Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, who's playing the current Batman, Kristen Stewart from the Twilight series of film, should be cast as the new Joker in the Robert Pattinson iteration of the Gotham universe. What do you think of that? A woman to play the Joker. But then doesn't it get close to Harley Quinn? Squid Game has been in the news again. The English Council of Bedfordshire has urged parents not to let their children watch it because copycat games are happening in the playground. Children are being physically hurt. Challenges have been made. Now, I get really fed up with these stories about it's parental responsibility to make sure your children don't watch things. If your children do watch things and there's copycat sort of behaviour, again, it's up to parents to do this. I do sometimes worry we get very mollycoddled as a state. I suppose one thing that you could say about this is Squid Games is homing in on children's games, and to that extent it's almost appealing to that demographic because it's a nostalgic kind of twist on childhood games turned into vicious, nasty, murderous experiences. What do you think about that, guys? Do you think it should be censored? Do you think there should be stronger restrictions on streaming and what can be shown and what can be accessed? I love this story. This news story. Jamie Lee Curtis. She's running around at the moment trying to avoid Michael Myers for the 87,000th time. Michael Myers has found a new knife. Where does he get his knives from? Where does he buy them? Does he buy them from... Where would you buy a knife from? John Lewis? I don't know. They're really great knives and Nadia needs some and I want one. So if you've got Michael Myers' number, give us a shout. This story's great though, it's got nothing to do with Halloween. Jamie Lee Curtis. She has the rights to a story about the first guy to do the high five. Yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis has got the rights to the story of the LA Dodger player Glenn Burke, who on October the 2nd, 1977, the same year, or the year thereabouts that Star Wars was released in the UK, delivered the first ever recorded high five. It was caught on camera, it was caught on television, he did the high five. Jamie Lee Curtis has had the rights to this story for many, many years, so she's hooked up with Ryan Murphy, the producer of things like American Horror Story, American Crime Story, and they're producing this, they're turning this into a film, and it's got a more interesting kind of element to it, in that Glenn Burke, the LA Dodgers baseball player who did the high five, was also the first gay baseball player to essentially come out. The new film, or the film, is called Outfielder. I just think there's something really lovely about this, and Jamie Lee Curtis has had the rights to it for many, many years, and now she's found Ryan Murphy. They're probably chatting. I know Jamie Lee Curtis is in one of his other series somewhere. I just think that's a really nice, I just think it's a lovely potential subject for a film. The high five. Who'd have thought it? The high five. Imagine being the first person to do a high five. Renee, she's been in the news recently, is wearing a fat suit as bad as blackface. Or black facing. She's come under some stick for donning a fat suit, where in a new show called in a new show where she's playing Pam Hupp, who's a serial killer, and so for it she dons a fat suit and she has prosthetics done on her face and what have you. But some people have described the prosthetics and the fat suit as damaging, fatphobic, and potentially triggering to fat people. Are they? Are they? I mean, are you an overweight person who finds that triggering? We posted it on our Instagram, and a lot of people were talking about the fact that isn't that what actors do? You have makeup at all times, you have wigs, you have costumes. Is this not just another embellished version of that? Plus size writer Sarah Alexander said, quote, "A fat suit has always been a way of mocking fat people, no matter who wears it, even if it is for an acting role." I don't know if I necessarily agree. I think you're right when it comes to comedic scenes of taking the piss, or where the comedy simply revolves around them being large. She goes on to say, actors that have previously worn them, Gwyneth Paltrow, Sarah Paulson, have admitted they regret their choice in wearing one and that it causes harm. What do you think, guys? That's one of those discussion topics. Please leave your thoughts below. I'd be fascinated to know what you think about that. Personally, I don't think it is in the same category. Personally, I think it's just an element of an actor's tools, yeah? Or a makeup artist's tools, or a filmmaker's tools. We may need a bigger theatre for this next story. There's a huge vogue for what I would call the 80s Spielbergian classics. Back to the Future has become a musical in the West End. Don't know why. It doesn't really appeal to me. I don't know why. I don't want the sanctity of the original movie to be kind of made light of and then sung. I did get frustrated that so many things that turned into musicals. Was Big, the Tom Hanks film, turned into a musical. But this project I'm interested in. This project is called The Shark is Broken, and it's the retelling of the off-camera, obviously, making of the film Jaws, which starred Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss. This play has been written by and performing, a little bit like the Sopranos story, and he's playing his father, Robert Shaw. So Ian Shaw has written this and is starring in it and is playing his father. It retells the story of there was a huge, well-reported conflict between Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw's character. Robert Shaw, the sort of, the gnarly, experienced seafaring. Robert Shaw versus Richard Dreyfuss, the sort of academic, hasn't done a hard day's work in his life, sort of shark specialist oceanographer. And caught in the middle is Roy Scheider, sort of looking absolutely perplexed and thinking, Christ, there's a shark eating people on Amity Beach. This tells the story of the behind-the-scenes conflict, but also all of the nightmare of making the film. It ran over budget, it ran over schedule. They made a shark which was called Bruce after, I think, Spielberg's lawyer or accountant. It never worked. For me, I love anything about behind-the-scenes filmmaking or things that go wrong on set. And so for me, I think this is going to be a really, really cool play. Please don't do a musical of the Goonies. Please don't do a musical of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's eggy, it's awkward, and it's frustrating. But this, behind the scenes, about the shark is broken, I like the sound of. And so our moment for films of the week. What's coming out this week? Well, Dune. It's the big tentpole release of the week. Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve, starring Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Javier Bardem, Jason Momoa, Oscar Isaac. Who else? Josh Brolin, my favourite. Rebecca Ferguson, another favourite. So it's a huge star-studded cast. A retelling of Frank Herbert's classic sci-fi book. Other big film release this week. Bit quirky, bit kooky, bit odd and strange, just like all the rest of his films, is Wes Anderson's The French Dispatch. Again, another star-laden cast. Ralph Fiennes is in it. It's about a publication, a strange, quirky, kooky publication. And like all Wes Anderson's films, you don't know where it's set, you don't know when it's set, you don't know why it's set. It's weird, it's symmetrical, the colour palette is always interesting, pastels and what have you. The camera does odd things. It's very contrived, but at the same time, it can be fun. We're big fans, well, me, Maddie and Kiki are big fans of the Fantastic Mr. Fox. And sometimes I think I find his films, I don't know, there's a sort of an emotional disconnect in there sometimes. Something odd, I don't know. But yeah, and apparently loosely based, I think, on the New Yorker magazine. And the other film that's released this week that won't get much press and won't get much attention, which is why we draw attention to it, is something called The Harder They Fall, which is like a corrective Western. It's a Western. Who's in it? It stars Idris Elba, Zazie Beetz, Jonathan Majors, who's from that wonderful indie film The Last Black Man in San Francisco. And this is an interesting fact. A third of all cowboys and rodeo riders back in the day were black, and they've been whitewashed from the Western genre and Western films. It seeks to take those symbols of cowboy films, Stetsons, guns, horses, all that stuff, and reappropriate them and give ownership of them to black people. And that was your rushed rush through the weekly rushes. I hope you've enjoyed it. Leave your comments below. See you next week.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.